He's bleeding out, Vance! Stick to your kit! I can't patch a chest wound if an RPG vaporizes us in 10 seconds, Chief. The wind howled through the shattered window frame of the minaret, carrying the distinct, terrifying rhythmic thud of a DSHK heavy machine gun tearing through the courtyard below. Petty Officer Elara Vance knelt in the dust, her hands slick with the blood of the team's designated marksman, Miller. Miller was gasping, his throat gurgling, the M107 Barrett anti-material rifle lying uselessly beside his convulsing leg. "Target is bracketing the extract bird." The radio crackled, the pilot's voice pitching into panic. Wave off! Heavy armor moving in!" "Chief, give me the spot," Elara yelled, her voice cracking but her hands moving from the gauze to the cold steel of the .50 caliber muzzle brake. Chief O'Malley looked at her, his face smeared with grime, eyes wide with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You're a corpsman. You don't touch that trigger. That is a direct order." Elara racked the bolt. The metallic clack-clack echoed louder than the gunfire outside. She felt the massive weight of the weapon settle into her shoulder, the recoil pad digging into her bruised collarbone. Through the scope, the world turned into a grid of math and windage. "Order noted," she whispered, exhaling until her lungs were empty. "But 30 heartbeats are about to stop down there if I don't." Blackout. 18 hours earlier, Forward Operating Base Rusty Nail, Kunar Province. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Rusty Nail smelled of stale coffee, CLP gun oil, and aggressive masculinity. Petty Officer Second Class Elara Vance stood near the back, her spine pressing against the cool, corrugated metal of the wall. She adjusted the strap of her medical bag, a nervous tick she couldn't quite suppress. "Target package is a sit-down. Chai and lies with the local elders," Lieutenant Commander Rick said, tapping the projected map with a laser pointer. "Ranger Platoon 3-1 is moving into the Zabad Valley. We are the insurance policy. Echo Team will insert at OP Anvil, here on the northern ridge. Provide overwatch. If it goes south, you rain hate." Elara felt the eyes in the room shift, not to her, but through her. To the men of Echo Team, she was a piece of mandatory furniture, a cultural support team attachment required, because the rules of engagement dictated that male soldiers couldn't search or treat local women. "Hey, Doc," a voice drawled from the front row. It was Miller, the team's lead sniper. He was a mountain of a man, beard thick enough to hide a sidearm in, currently cleaning his nails with a combat knife. "You sure you got enough tampons in that kit? Heard the altitude makes things messy." A ripple of low laughter moved through the seated SEALs. Elara didn't flinch. She'd heard it all before. "I packed extra tourniquets, Miller. Figure with your mouth you'll likely bite your tongue off eventually." The laughter shifted, sharper this time, directed at Miller. He stopped cleaning his nails and turned, his eyes narrowing. "Cute. Just stay out of the scope's way, Vance. This is a kinetic environment. We don't have time to babysit if you get spooked by the noise." Chief O'Malley, the platoon chief, stepped in, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "Stow it. Wheels up in 30. Vance, you're with Miller and me on the bird. You carry the medical comms and the trauma bag. If we take fire, you get low. If we take casualties, you do your job. You do not engage unless I tell you to. Am I clear?" "Crystal, Chief," Elara said, her voice flat. They moved to the prep room, the cage. The atmosphere shifted from banter to a ritualistic silence. Elara watched as Miller prepped his primary weapon system, the M107 Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle. It was a beast of engineering, nearly 30 pounds of steel and optics capable of stopping a vehicle engine block from a mile away. She watched him check the scope, a Schmidt and Bender 525 56. He dialed in the 0, his movements practiced but arrogant. He slapped the magazine in with a little too much force. He's treating it like a hammer, Elara thought, not a scalpel. She turned to her own gear. Her M4 carbine was light, stripped down. Her real weapon was the 30-pound Alice pack filled with saline, combat gauze, chest seals, and morphine auto-injectors. The weight was different. It was the weight of responsibility, of putting people back together after men like Miller took them apart. "Heavy load for a little thing," O'Malley said, appearing beside her. He was checking his radio frequencies. "I can carry my weight, Chief." "It ain't the weight of the bag I'm worried about," O'Malley muttered, looking at her hands. They were small, slender, surgeon's hands. "We're going up to 8,000 feet. Thin air, bad comms. If Miller goes down, that rifle is the only thing keeping the Rangers alive down in the valley. You understand the geometry of that?" "I understand geometry, Chief." "Good." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper so the others wouldn't hear. "Don't try to be a hero, Vance. Heroes get zipped up in bags. Just keep us breathing." Elara nodded, hoisting her pack. The straps dug into her shoulders, familiar and grounding. She looked over at Miller, who was slinging the massive Barrett over his back, joking with his spotter. He looked invincible. But Elara knew better. In the valley, flesh was soft, and bullets didn't care about bravado. She touched the grim Reaper patch on her sleeve, the unofficial morale patch of the corpsman. "I save lives," she reminded herself. "That's what I do. That's all I do." She walked out into the blinding Afghan sunlight, the heat hitting her like a physical blow. The rotors of the Black Hawk were already spinning, kicking up a storm of golden dust. As she ran toward the bird, head down, she didn't know that in less than 6 hours, the definition of who she was would be rewritten in gunpowder and blood. The timeline had started. The silence was about to end. The world inside the MH-60 Blackhawk was a vibrating purgatory of noise and kerosene fumes. Elara sat on the edge of the floor, legs dangling into the void, the safety strap biting into her waist. Below, the Zabad Valley was a swallowed expanse of black ink, broken only by the occasional flicker of a cooking fire in a remote village. "1 minute!" the crew chief screamed, holding up a single finger. Elara adjusted her helmet. The weight of the ANPVS-31 night vision goggles pulled her head forward, straining her neck muscles. She flipped them down. The world instantly transformed into a grain-heavy spectrum of green and white. The seals around her became glowing, monstrous silhouettes, their lasers and gear rendering them more machine than human. Miller was across from her, his M107 Barrett held between his knees like a staff. Even in the grainy phosphor view, she could see him checking his watch, completely at ease. He looked like he was commuting to an office job, not dropping into a hostile mountain range. The chopper flared, the nose pitching up violently as they decelerated. The rotor wash kicked up a brownout, a blinding cloud of dust and debris that enveloped the aircraft. "Go, go, go!" Elara unhooked her safety line and dropped. Her boots hit the rocky scree with a jarring thud that rattled her teeth. The weight of her aid bag, 60 pounds of fluids and trauma gear, slammed into her spine. She stumbled, correcting her balance just as O'Malley landed beside her, a phantom in the dust. They moved instantly. No words. Just hand signals and violence of action. The bird lifted off, the sound of its rotors fading rapidly into the night, leaving them in a silence so sudden it felt like deafness. The hike to the OP was a vertical punishment. The Zabad ridgeline sat at 8,000 feet, and the air was thin, offering little oxygen to burning lungs. Miller and the point man, a lanky operator named Davis, moved with the unnatural grace of mountain goats. They didn't seem to breathe. Elara gritted her teeth, forcing air through her nose to keep her breathing quiet. Every step was a battle against gravity. Her thighs burned, and the straps of her ruck cut off the circulation to her arms. She slipped on a patch of loose shale, sending a small cascade of rocks skittering down the slope. The noise sounded like a thunderclap in the stillness. Miller stopped. He didn't turn around. He just raised a fist. Freeze. Elara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She waited for the reprimand, the hiss of annoyance. Miller held the pause for 10 seconds, scanning the dark, before dropping his hand and moving on. The message was clear. You are a liability. They reached a narrow choke point, goat trail winding between two massive boulders. Davis, on point, scanned the ground with his thermal imager, then stepped over a cluster of sagebrush, signaling the path was clear. Elara followed, her eyes glued to the ground through her NVGs. As she stepped where Davis had stepped, something caught her eye. The sagebrush wasn't just growing there. A branch near the base was snapped. Not withered, but broken. The inner wood glowing slightly brighter in the IR spectrum because the sap was still wet. Next to it, the dust had been pressed flat, not by a hoof, but by something with a flat sole. A sandal? A boot? She stopped. "Tell them!" her training screamed. "Stop the line!" She looked at O'Malley's back ahead of her. He was checking his comms, focused, professional. If she stopped them now for a broken twig, and it turned out to be nothing, just a goat or the wind, she would be the girl who cried wolf. The female attachment who got spooked by a shadow. They already thought she was luggage. Calling a halt would confirm it. It's probably nothing, she told herself. Davis is a SEAL. He would have seen it. She swallowed the dry lump in her throat and stepped over the broken branch. She kept moving. They reached the crest of the ridge 20 minutes later. It was a perfect sniper hide, a natural depression in the rock offering a commanding view of the valley floor, 2 kilometers away. The village below was a cluster of mud brick compounds, silent and sleeping. "Set up," O'Malley whispered, his voice barely audible. Miller, taking the long gun. "Vance, rear security, keep your head down and your eyes open." Elara dropped her pack, the relief washing over her physically, but mentally, the knot in her stomach tightened. She moved to the rear of the formation, settling into a crevice that watched their back trail. She unslung her M4, checking the chamber. Miller was already prone, unfolding the bipod of the M107. He draped a camouflage net over the barrel, blending the weapon into the stone. He looked natural there, a predator in his element. "Radio check," O'Malley murmured. "Good check," Miller replied. Elara stared down the scope of her carbine, watching the trail they had just hiked. The green glow of her optics showed nothing but rocks and shadows. But in her mind, she saw that broken sagebrush again. The sap was wet. "Chief," she whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Go," O'Malley replied, not looking at her. "The trail up, I thought I saw—" She hesitated. Miller shifted, the sound of his nylon gear rasping against the rock. "Spit it out, Vance," Miller said, his eye never leaving his scope. "Nothing," Elara said, shrinking back into the dark. "Just shadows. Thought I saw movement, but it was nothing." "Keep it together, Doc," O'Malley said, his tone dismissing her. "Don't hallucinate until we've been here at least 24 hours. Elara stayed silent. She gripped the pistol grip of her rifle until her knuckles turned white. She had made a choice. She had chosen compliance over instinct. As the cold wind of the Hindu Kush began to cut through her uniform, she prayed that her silence wouldn't be the thing that killed them. Below in the village, a dog barked, then another. And then silence returned, heavier than before. The sun rose over the Hindu Kush not as a dawn, but as an interrogation lamp. Within an hour, the freezing bite of the night evaporated, replaced by a radiant heat that baked the rocks and shimmered the air in the valley below. In the OP, movement was death. Elara lay prone behind a cluster of jagged rocks, her body pressed into the dust. A camouflage net, dusted with local dirt and dried grass, was draped over them, creating a stifling oven of shadow. "Temp," Miller whispered. He hadn't moved a muscle in 4 hours. 92 degrees Fahrenheit, O'Malley replied, checking the Kestrel 5700 wind meter propped on a rock. Barometric pressure steady. Wind is 2 miles per hour, full value from the left. It's going to pick up after noon. Miller adjusted the turrets on his scope with a gloved hand. Click, click. The sound was microscopic, but in the silence of the hide, it was loud. He was building his range card, mapping the valley floor into sectors of fire. "Hey, Doc," Miller murmured, his voice barely audible over the comms loop. "Quiz time. Keep your brain from turning to mush." Elara sighed silently, her eye glued to her own spotting scope. "Go ahead." "I take a round through the femoral artery, high thigh. Too high for a tourniquet." "What's your move?" "Junctional tourniquet if I have it," Elara recited, scanning a cluster of mud walls 2,000 meters away. "If not, direct pressure, knee into the groin, pack the wound with combat gauze. Celox or quick clot. Hold for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time when you're taking fire," Miller muttered. "You gonna hold pressure while O'Malley is engaging? You gonna expose yourself to pack my crotch? If you're bleeding out, Miller, you aren't shooting. If you aren't shooting, we're all dead. So yes, I pack the wound." Miller chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Cute. Theoretical medicine is always clean. Wait until you try to pack a wound that's pumping like a fire hose while you're eating dirt." "Cut the chatter," O'Malley ordered. "Eyes on the village. We have movement near the mosque." Elara shifted her focus. Through the high-powered optics of the spotting scope, the village of Zabad was magnified into startling clarity. She could see the heat waves rising off the tin roofs. A few chickens pecked at the dust. An old man sat by a well, washing his feet. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. "I have a male military-aged carrying—" "Looks like a shovel," Elara said, marking the grid on her map. "Digging?" O'Malley asked. "No, he just walked behind the north wall of the compound at grid 44 Bravo. He looked up at the ridge." "They always look at the ridges," Miller dismissed. "Locals know we watch. Doesn't mean they're hostile." Elara didn't like it. She panned her scope slowly to the left, scanning the deep shadows of a large, ruined structure that might have been a garage or a barn. The entrance was draped with heavy burlap sheets. The wind, which O'Malley had predicted, was starting to gust, whipping up dust devils on the valley floor. A gust caught the burlap, lifting it for a fraction of a second. Elara blinked. "Chief, I saw something. Grid 44 Charlie. The structure with the blue door frame." "What did you see?" "Glint. Metal. Not a shovel. It looked like chrome." Miller scoffed. "Probably a bumper on an old Hilux. They use them for taxis." "It was high," Elara insisted. "Mounted high, like a DSHK barrel or a heavy mount. Negative on that, Miller said, peering through the superior optics of the M107. I've got eyes on it now. The curtain is down. I don't see heat signatures. Engine is cold. They could have parked it there last night, Elara pressed, the memory of the fresh track on the ridge path gnawing at her. Chief, if they have a heavy gun set up in that garage, it has a direct line of sight to the meeting point. O'Malley was silent for a moment. Noted, Vance. But we don't call in an airstrike on a hunch about a shiny bumper. Keep watching it. The dismissal stung, but the professional part of her accepted it. ROE, rules of engagement, were strict. Positive identification, PID, was required. You didn't drop a bomb on a garage because the medic saw a flash of light. Rangers are 10 mics out, O'Malley announced. Echo team, go hot. Safety's off. Elara felt the shift in the air. The lethargy of the weight vanished, replaced by a sharp, electric tension. She checked her M4, ensuring a round was chambered, then checked her medical bag again. It was a nervous habit. Far to the south, a column of dust announced the arrival of the Ranger convoy. 3 Humvees and a cargo truck. They looked like toys from this height, crawling along the winding dirt road that followed the dry riverbed. They're bunching up, Miller criticized. Intervals are shit. 1 IED takes out 2 trucks. They're Rangers, Miller. They like to hold hands, O'Malley said. Vance, you on the radio? Copy. Listening to their net. Elara tuned her headset to the Ranger frequency. It was full of chatter. Young voices, confident, joking about the heat. They had no idea 3 people were watching them from the cliffs above. They had no idea that a mile away, behind a burlap curtain, something might be waiting. Lead vehicle passing the checkpoint, the Ranger PL, platoon leader reported. No activity. Village looks clear. We are moving to the Shura site. Elara watched the trucks roll past the outer walls of the village. The old man, by the well, stood up and walked away quickly. The chickens scattered. The civilian is bugging out, Elara said, her voice tight. The guy at the well, he left his water jug. I see it, O'Malley said, his tone darkening. Miller? I don't like it, Miller said, his finger sliding into the trigger guard of the Barrett. Streets are too empty. Usually kids come out to beg for candy. Ranger 1, this is Overwatch. O'Malley spoke into the radio, breaking radio silence. Be advised, atmospherics are shifting. Civilians are clearing the area. Maintain dispersion. Copy, Overwatch. The Ranger voice crackled back, sounding unconcerned. We have the elders in sight, dismounting in 2 mics. The convoy halted in the center of the market square. Doors opened, Rangers poured out, weapons raised, forming a perimeter. It was a textbook deployment. But from her vantage point, Elara saw the geometry of the trap. The Rangers were in a low depression. The buildings surrounded them on 3 sides, and directly facing the lead Humvee, 400 meters away, was the garage with the blue doorframe. Chief, Elara whispered, the angle. If that's a heavy machine gun. Wait, O'Malley hissed. The burlap curtain at grid 44 Charlie didn't lift. It was torn down. A Toyota Land Cruiser, the back cut away to mount a twin-barreled ZPU-2 anti-aircraft gun, roared out of the darkness of the garage. It didn't aim at the sky. It leveled its barrels straight at the clustered Rangers. Ambush! Miller shouted, the boom of his voice coinciding with the first terrifying thump, thump, thump of heavy-caliber fire echoing up the canyon. Contact front! Elara screamed into the radio, but she was drowned out by the chaos below. The trap had snapped shut. The sound of a ZPU-2 firing is not a rattle. It is a rhythmic mechanical thudding that vibrates in the chest cavity even from a mile away. Down in the valley, the 14.5mm rounds tore through the lead Ranger Humvee like a chainsaw through wet cardboard. The vehicle shuddered, glass exploding into a mist of diamonds, before veering sharply into a mud wall. "Troops in contact! I say again, troops in contact!" Elara screamed into the mic, her voice rising above the din. "Grid 44 Charlie, heavy machine gun, technical north side." Next to her, the world exploded. Boom. Miller had fired. The muzzle blast of the M107 kicked up a cloud of dust around the OP, momentarily blinding them. The overpressure slapped Elara in the face, a hot, dry wind that tasted of burnt powder. "Hit!" O'Malley roared, his binoculars glued to his eyes. "Gunner is down! Send it again, Miller! Punch the engine!" Miller racked the bolt, clack, clack, a sound of terrifying precision amidst the chaos. He settled back into the stock. Boom. Down in the valley, the technical bucked violently. Smoke poured from the hood as the .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary round smashed into the Yamaha engine block. The heavy gun fell silent. For a heartbeat, Elara thought they had won. The Rangers were pouring out of the disabled vehicles, returning fire, dragging their wounded to cover. The threat was neutralized. Then she heard the whistle. It wasn't the sharp crack of a bullet. It was a low, mournful sound, like air being torn apart by something heavy. "Incoming!" O'Malley screamed, tackling Elara into the dirt. Crump. The ground heaved. A geyser of rock and shale erupted 50 meters down the slope, spraying the hide with debris. The shockwave rattled Elara's teeth. "Mortars!" Miller yelled, not moving from his scope. "They have us bracketed. That was a ranging shot. Displace! We need to move!" Elara scrambled to grab her medical bag, panic flaring in her chest. "Negative!" O'Malley grabbed her vest, pinning her down. "If we move now, we're exposed on the skyline. They're waiting for us to run. They're walking it in." The second round hit closer. Crump. This time, it was behind them, about 30 meters up the ridge. Dust rained down on Elara's neck. They were trapped. The enemy mortar team wasn't shooting at the Rangers. They had been waiting for the sniper to reveal his position. The moment Miller fired, they had their coordinates. "I see the tube!" Miller shouted. "Grid 50 Alpha, courtyard!" "Kill it!" O'Malley ordered. Miller racked the bolt again. He was calm, terrifyingly so. He exhaled, his body going slack. Elara watched his finger tighten on the trigger. He was the angel of death, the only thing that could stop the mortars. Boom! Miller fired. But simultaneous with his shot, the air above them split open. The third mortar round didn't land long or short. It landed directly on the lip of their rock shelf. The world turned white. The sound wasn't a noise. It was a physical erasure of senses. Elara felt herself lifted off the ground and thrown backward, slamming hard against the rear wall of the depression. Her helmet smashed against stone. Darkness flooded her vision, speckled with angry sparks of light. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no pain. Just a high-pitched ringing that sounded like a scream trapped inside her own skull. Then, the sound rushed back in, a roar of returning consciousness. "Miller! Miller!" O'Malley's voice was distorted, frantic. Elara gasped, inhaling dust. She rolled onto her stomach, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. She blinked, clearing the grit from her eyes. The OP was a ruin. The camouflage net was shredded and burning. O'Malley was stumbling to his feet, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his rifle gone. But it was Miller who froze her blood. The sniper was lying on his back, thrown clear of the weapon. His left leg was bent at an impossible angle. But that wasn't the problem. His chest armor was shredded. The ceramic plate cracked open like an eggshell by shrapnel. Dark, arterial, blood was already pooling beneath him, soaking into the dry Afghan dust at a terrifying rate. The M107 lay on its side, the scope twisted, the barrel resting in the dirt. "Vance!" O'Malley screamed, grabbing her shoulder and shaking her. "Get up! Fix him!" Elara's training kicked in before her brain did. The fear vanished, replaced by the mechanical checklist of trauma. Massive hemorrhage, airway, respiration. She crawled to Miller, her hands slick with sweat. He was conscious, his eyes wide and unfocused, mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He was trying to scream, but no sound was coming out. "I've got him," she said, though her own voice sounded miles away. She ripped the shears from her vest and cut through his shirt, exposing the ruin of his shoulder and chest. "RPG or mortar?" Miller wheezed, pink froth bubbling on his lips. "Save your breath," Elara commanded, jamming her knee into his axilla to cut off the blood flow to the arm while she fumbled for a tourniquet. "Chief, I need suppression. They're going to fire again." "I'm on it." O'Malley grabbed his carbine, scrambling to the edge of the crater to return fire. Elara tightened the windlass of the tourniquet until Miller groaned in agony. "Sorry, sorry." She checked the chest. A sucking chest wound. The lung was collapsing. "I need to needle him," she muttered to herself, ripping open a chest seal. As she worked, slapping the plastic seal over the bubbling hole in his chest, she looked up. The M107 lay 5 feet away. The enemy mortar team was still out there. The Rangers were still pinned down. And the only weapon capable of reaching them was lying in the dirt, its master broken and bleeding out under her hands. The radio on O'Malley's vest crackled. "Overwatch! Overwatch! We are taking heavy fire! Where is that sniper support?" Elara looked at Miller. He was fading, shock setting in. He gripped her wrist with a bloody hand, his grip surprisingly weak. "Gun," he whispered. "The gun." He wasn't worried about his life. He was worried about the mission. Elara looked at the rifle. Then she looked at the valley below, where tracers were stitching the air. The timeline had collapsed. The plan was dead, and she was the only one left with 2 working hands. "Hold still, damn it!" Elara shouted, her voice cracking. Miller wasn't listening. He was fighting an enemy that wasn't there, his good arm flailing, knocking the combat gauze from her hand. His eyes were rolled back, showing the whites, pupils blown wide with shock. The mortar blast had done more than shred his shoulder. The concussion had scrambled his brain. "Vance! He's bleeding out!" O'Malley yelled from the rim of the crater, firing short, controlled bursts with his M4. "Fix him and get a gun in the fight." "I'm trying." Elara pinned Miller's thrashing arm with her knee. She grabbed a packet of Celox gauze, ripping it open with her teeth. She jammed the hemostatic agent deep into the jagged cavity of his shoulder, right where the subclavian artery should be. Miller let out a guttural roar, his body arching off the ground. I know! Elara hissed, sweat dripping from her nose onto his bloody chest. She leaned her entire body weight onto the wound, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The blood was hot and slick, coating her gloves, making everything slippery. The smell was overwhelming, copper and bowel, the distinct scent of opened bodies. Above them, the air snapped. Crack, crack, crack. "They're ranging us with small arms," O'Malley shouted. He ducked as a round sparked off the rock inches from his face. "We are combat ineffective, Vance. We need to move." "He can't move," Elara yelled back. "If I let pressure off, he dies in 30 seconds. If we stay here, we all die in 10. Elara looked down at Miller. The thrashing had stopped. His skin was turning a grayish blue, the color of wet clay. The fight was leaving him. She checked the tourniquet she had placed high on his arm. It was tight, the windlass bent from the force she'd used, but the damage was too high up into the torso. The gauze was the only thing holding his blood inside. She grabbed a pressure dressing, the Israeli bandage, and wrapped it tightly over the packed wound, pulling the plastic bar down hard to cinch it. "Stay with me, Miller," she whispered. She checked his pulse. Thready, fast. He was in hypovolemic shock. She fumbled for an IV line, but her hands were shaking too badly. "Forget the fluids," she told herself. "Stop the bleeding. Keep him warm." She threw a space blanket over his legs, the crinkling silver material looking absurdly festive in the dust. "Status?" O'Malley demanded, sliding down into the depression to reload. He looked wild, his face caked in dust and blood that wasn't his. "He's stable." "Barely." Elara wiped her hands on her pants, leaving dark streaks. "But he's out. He's not shooting anything today." O'Malley looked at the unconscious sniper, then at the M107 lying in the dirt. He cursed, a vile stream of profanity. "That leaves us with 2 carbines against a mortar team and 50 squirters. What about the Rangers?" O'Malley crawled back to the rim and looked through his binoculars. His shoulders slumped. Bad. Real bad. Elara crawled up beside him, keeping her head low. She peered over the edge. The valley floor was a slaughterhouse. The Rangers had established a defensive perimeter in a dry irrigation ditch, but they were pinned. And now, the nightmare scenario was unfolding. From the northern edge of the village, a beast emerged. It wasn't another technical. It was a BTR-80, an 8-wheeled armored personnel carrier. Its turret swiveled with mechanical indifference, the 30mm cannon pointing directly at the ditch where the Rangers were huddled. "Armor," O'Malley whispered. "We didn't brief for armor." "Can the Rangers take it out?" "They used their AT-4s on the technicals. They're dry. That thing is going to chew them up." As if to punctuate his words, the BTR fired. Thump, thump, thump. Explosions walked across the Ranger position. Dust and body parts flew into the air. The radio on O'Malley's chest screamed with static and voices of men dying. "Overwatch! We are taking 30mm fire! We are ineffective! We need immediate suppression on the armor!" O'Malley raised his M4 and fired a burst at the BTR. The bullet sparked harmlessly off the sloped steel hull 2,000 meters away. It was like throwing gravel at a tank. "It's too far," O'Malley said, his voice hollow. 556 won't scratch it. We need the 50. He looked back at the M107. Then he looked at his own hands. He was a shooter, a door kicker. But he wasn't a sniper. He didn't know the dope. He didn't know the wind calls. Elara followed his gaze to the rifle. It lay in the dirt like a fallen monument. The scope was dusty, the bipod legs splayed. It was heavy, brutal, and terrifying. She looked at Miller, unconscious, dying. She looked at O'Malley, impotent with his carbine. And then she looked at the BTR, grinding forward, its turret adjusting for a kill shot on the remaining survivors. She didn't make a conscious decision. It wasn't a thought. It was a physical impulse, born of desperation and the absolute refusal to watch 30 men die while she sat on a hill. Elara slid back down into the hole. She crawled over Miller's legs. She reached out and grabbed the pistol grip of the M107. The steel was hot from the sun and the earlier shots. It felt alien in her hand. Too big, too aggressive. "Vance!" O'Malley's voice was sharp. "What the hell are you doing?" Elara didn't answer. She dragged the 30-pound rifle toward the rim of the crater. The bipod legs scraped against the rock. She tasted bile and blood. She shoved the stock into her shoulder, wincing as it hit the bruise from her pack strap. "Vance, put it down!" O'Malley barked. "That's not a toy. You don't know the hold." Elara put her eye to the scope. The world narrowed. The BTR filled the view, a gray monster belching smoke. "I know the math, Chief," she whispered, her finger finding the trigger. "Physics is just physics." She wasn't a medic anymore. Not right now. The red cross on her patch didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the crosshair. "Vance, stand down! That is a direct order!" O'Malley's hand clamped onto Elara's shoulder, his grip bruising through the fabric of her uniform. He tried to haul her back from the edge of the crater, but Elara had wedged her boots into the loose shale, locking her body into a prone position behind the massive rifle. "Your 5.56 is bouncing off!" Elara shouted back, not looking at him. Her face was pressed against the stock of the M107. "You might as well be throwing rocks, Chief. We have to hit it now." "You don't know the dope! You don't know the hold!" O'Malley screamed, panic edging into his command voice. "That rifle kicks like a mule. You miss and you tell that BTR exactly where we are. You'll get us killed for nothing." Elara ignored him. She forced her breathing to slow, fighting the adrenaline that made her hands tremble. She looked through the Schmidt and Bender scope. The optic was set for Miller's eye relief, not hers. She had to inch her head forward, struggling to find the eye box without getting scoped, having the recoil drive the metal ring into her eye socket. The image cleared. The BTR-80 was a nightmare magnified. Through the glass, she could see the reactive armor plates, the commander's hatch, and the heat shimmer rising from the engine vents in the rear. It was churning up a cloud of dust, rolling over the crushed remains of a market stall. The turret was traversing, the long black barrel of the 30mm cannon hunting for the Rangers huddled in the ditch. "It's flanking left!" O'Malley yelled, abandoning his attempt to pull her off. He grabbed his radio. "Ranger 1, break contact! Move east! You have armor flanking left!" "We can't move!" The Ranger PL's voice was a distortion of static and terror. "We have 3 urgent surgical casualties. We are pinned. Do you have a shot or not?" O'Malley looked at Elara. The desperation in his eyes was absolute. He hated this. He hated relying on a support attachment, a medic, a girl, to do the job of his best operator. It went against every layer of protocol, training, and brotherhood he knew. "Vance," O'Malley said, his voice dropping to a low, intense growl. "That is a MK211 Raufoss round in the chamber. Armor-piercing incendiary. You have 5 rounds in the mag. If you take this shot, you own it. You understand? There is no oops with a 50 cal. "I understand," Elara whispered. She adjusted the bipod legs, digging them into the dirt. The rifle weighed nearly 30 pounds. It smelled of hot cosmoline and burnt powder. It felt less like a gun and more like an industrial machine, cold and indifferent. She looked at the elevation turret. Miller had dialed it for the initial engagement range, 200 meters. The BTR was closer now, maybe 800 meters, but it was moving. Ballistics, she thought. It's just math. Gravity is a constant. Wind is a variable. She remembered the nights in the Appalachians, her father teaching her to shoot deer across the valleys. Don't chase the target. Let it walk into the crosshair. But a deer wasn't an armored vehicle moving at 40 kilometers per hour, preparing to turn 30 men into pink mist. "It's lining up," O'Malley shouted. "They're going to fire." The BTR had stopped. The suspension settled. The turret locked onto the ranger ditch. Elara felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't triage. This wasn't stopping a bleed. This was taking a life. If she pulled this trigger. She wasn't a healer anymore. She was a combatant. She was crossing a line that she could never uncross. The Hippocratic oath whispered in the back of her mind. First, do no harm. To save them, a darker, colder voice answered, "You have to harm him." She pushed the safety lever down. Click. "Chief," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Spot for me." O'Malley hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, the soldier in him took over. He raised his binoculars. "Target is stationary," O'Malley barked. "Range 850. Wind is full value left to right, 5 miles an hour. Aim for the turret ring or the optics. Blind it." Elara settled her cheek against the stock. She inhaled deep, filling her lungs with the dusty air, and let it out halfway. The reticle hovered over the BTR. She didn't aim for the thick armor of the hull. She moved the crosshair up, to the cluster of glass blocks and sensors near the main gun, the eyes of the beast. "Sending it," she whispered. Her finger curled around the trigger. It was heavy, a 2-stage brake. She took up the slack. The world went silent. No wind, no screaming, just the beat of her own heart in her ears. Don't flinch. She squeezed. The explosion happened against her shoulder. It wasn't a push. It was a collision. The M107 bucked with the force of a car crash concentrated into a few square inches of rubber recoil pad. Elara's entire upper body was thrown backward, her boots scraping uselessly against the shale as the energy transferred through her frame. The scope kissed her eyebrow, a sharp, stinging bite, before the image blurred into a chaotic wash of gray and brown. Dust erupted around the OP, a thick, choking cloud raised by the muzzle brake's exhaust gases. For a second, Elara was blind, deaf, and gasping for air, her right shoulder throbbing with a dull, sickening ache. "Wait for it." O'Malley's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. The flight time of a .50 caliber round at 850 meters is roughly 1.2 seconds. It is a lifetime. Flash. Down in the valley, a spark of white-hot light bloomed on the turret of the BTR-80. It wasn't the dull thud of a miss in the dirt. It was the sharp, cracking report of metal striking glass and steel. "Impact!" O'Malley roared, slapping the ground. "Good hit! You smashed the main optic! Gunner is blind!" Elara scrambled back behind the rifle, blinking sweat and grit out of her eyes. She felt a trickle of warm blood running down her temple where the scope had tagged her. She ignored it. She looked through the glass. The BTR was reacting like a wounded beast. The turret, which had been tracking smoothly toward the Rangers, now jerked violently to the left, then the right. The 30mm cannon fired a 3-round burst, but the shots went wide, tearing up a mud wall 50 meters away from the Ranger position. "He can't see!" O'Malley shouted, his voice thick, with disbelief and adrenaline. "You took his eyes out! Cycle the bolt! Hit him again!" Elara reached for the large charging handle on the side of the receiver. Miller made this look easy, a fluid, one-handed motion, but Miller was 6'4" and lifted weights for fun. The spring inside the Barrett was stiff, designed to manage the violent forces of the ammunition. She grabbed the handle and pulled. It stuck halfway. "Come on," she grunted, gritting her teeth. She braced her boot against the bipod leg and yanked with both hands, using her entire body weight. The bolt slid back with a heavy metallic clack, ejecting the spent brass casing. The shell, hot enough to burn skin, landed near her elbow, smoking in the dirt. She let the bolt fly forward. Clang. It stripped a fresh round from the magazine and slammed it into the chamber. "Target is moving," O'Malley called. "He's panic driving. He's trying to reverse into cover." The blinded BTR was lurching backward, its engine roaring, black smoke pouring from the exhaust. It was retreating, but the 30mm cannon was still swinging wildly, spraying high-explosive rounds into the village. "Don't let him get away," O'Malley ordered. "If he repairs or swaps optics, he comes back. Disable the vehicle, put one in the engine block, rear deck." Elara settled back into the stock. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, vibrating focus. The pain in her shoulder was now just data, input to be managed. She knew what to expect now. She pulled the rifle tighter into her shoulder pocket, preloading the bipod to manage the jump. "Wind check?" she asked. Still holding. "Aim center mass on the rear grille," O'Malley said. "Send it." Elara tracked the moving vehicle. It was jerking erratically. She led the target slightly, placing the crosshair just ahead of the engine vents. Breathe. Pause. Squeeze. Boom. The recoil slammed her again, tearing at the fresh bruise on her shoulder. The dust cloud bloomed. "Hit!" O'Malley yelled. The MK211 Raufoss round did exactly what it was designed to do. It punched through the thin armor of the rear engine deck. The zirconium incendiary component ignited on impact, spraying superheated particles into the diesel engine. Smoke turned from black to white, then to angry, billowing gray. The BTR shuddered and ground to a halt, dead in the water. The turret stopped spinning. "Mobility kill," O'Malley breathed, lowering his binoculars. He looked at Elara. His expression was unreadable. Part shock, part respect, part fear. "You killed the engine." Elara didn't celebrate. She stared at the burning vehicle. Inside that metal box were men she was actively burning alive or trapping. A wave of nausea hit her, distinct from the adrenaline. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now that the immediate action was over. "Ranger 1 to Overwatch," the radio crackled. The voice was breathless. "Good effect on target. That armor is down. We are moving to the extract point. Thanks for the assist." "Who took that shot?" O'Malley looked at the radio, then at the medic wiping blood from her forehead. "Overwatch is, effective," O'Malley said, dodging the question. "Keep moving, Ranger 1. We're still hot up here." Elara rolled onto her back, gasping for air. The sky above was a brilliant, cruel blue. She looked at her hands. They were covered in dust, gun oil, and Miller's dried blood. They looked like the hands of a mechanic or a butcher. "Check Miller," O'Malley said, his voice softer now. "Then get back on the gun. We aren't done." Elara crawled back to the unconscious sniper. Miller was still pale, his breathing shallow but steady. The pressure dressing held. He was alive because she was a good medic. The Rangers were alive because she was a good shot. The duality tore at her. She checked Miller's pulse, feeling the faint rhythm of his life under her fingertips. "I am a healer," she told herself, the mantra feeling thinner than before. "I am a killer," the rifle whispered from the dirt. "Vance!" O'Malley's urgent whisper snapped her back. "Movement. The ridges. Infantry. They're coming for us." Elara looked up. The BTR was dead, but the hornet's nest had been kicked. Figures were moving on the adjacent slopes, darting between rocks. They weren't looking at the valley anymore. They were looking up. At the OP. The element of surprise was gone. The hunt was on. The silence following the destruction of the BTR's engine lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then, the ridge erupted. "Contact left! 9 o'clock! Climbers!" O'Malley screamed, spinning on his belly to face the slope leading up to their position. Elara dropped the heavy M107. It was useless for this fight. At close range, the .50 caliber rifle was a clumsy steel pipe. She grabbed her M4 carbine, the lightweight weapon feeling like a toy after the Barrett. Bullets cracked over their heads, snap, 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 digging furrows into the dirt and ricocheting off the rocks. The enemy infantry, a squad of about 8 fighters, was moving fast, darting between the boulders 300 meters down the slope. They knew where the sniper fire had come from, and they were closing the distance to negate the advantage of the long gun. "Suppress them!" O'Malley ordered, firing a controlled burst. Elara tucked into her shoulder, finding a gap in the rocks. She saw a flash of tan tunic, a dark beard. She didn't think about the man. She thought about the front sight post. Center mass. She squeezed the trigger twice. 2 brass casings spun into the air. The figure ducked back behind cover. "I'm low!" O'Malley yelled. "Reloading! Covering!" Elara shifted her fire, spraying the rocks where the enemy was advancing to keep their heads down. The rhythm of the fight took over. Fire, move, communicate. But for Elara, there was a third beat to the rhythm. Treat. Every time there was a lull, every time O'Malley took the lead on the trigger, Elara's hand left her weapon and flew to Miller's neck. Pulse check. Still there. Rapid, weak, but there. "How is he?" O'Malley barked, slapping a fresh magazine into his well. "He's crashing!" Elara yelled back, firing 2 rounds at a fighter trying to flank their right. "BP is dropping. I need to push fluids, but I can't get a line while we're shooting." "Then don't push fluids. Just keep shooting. If they get to grenade range, Miller's blood pressure won't matter." It was a brutal calculus. Elara forced herself to look away from the dying man and back down the sights. The heat was intensifying. Sweat ran into her eyes, stinging like acid. Her mouth tasted of copper, a mix of adrenaline and the metallic dust hanging in the air. "They're setting up a base of fire at the tree line," O'Malley called out. "Range?" Elara fumbled for her rangefinder. She lazed the gnarled juniper tree where muzzle flashes were sparkling. 350 meters. "Copy. Hold that sector. I'm checking the valley." O'Malley shifted back to look at the Rangers. "Damn it. Vance, I need eyes on the rear. Don't let them sneak up on us." Elara pivoted. She needed to remember the range for the tree line in case she had to switch back to the M203 grenade launcher or the M107. Tree line 350, Big Rock 200, washout 150. She reached for her tactical notebook, usually kept in her breast pocket. It was gone. Blown out during the mortar impact or lost when she dragged Miller. Panic flared for a second. In the chaos of a firefight, the brain dumps data. If she forgot the ranges, her shots would be guesses. Guesses got people killed. She looked down. Her hand was resting on the rock wall of the OP. It was smeared with red. She looked at Miller. The blood from his shoulder had pooled on the limestone, drying into a sticky, dark paste. Elara didn't hesitate. She didn't feel the revulsion she should have felt. She dipped her gloved index finger into the pool of Miller's blood. On the pale gray rock next to her head, she wrote, TR 350, RK 200. The letters were jagged, crimson, and horrific, but they were legible. "What the hell are you doing?" O'Malley asked, glancing over, his eyes wide. "Data," Elara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I lost my book." She dipped her finger again, marking a reference point for the wind. 5L. O'Malley stared at her for a split second, a flicker of something unsettled crossing his face. He had seen men do desperate things in combat, but seeing the medic use her patient as ink was a new kind of dark. "Right," O'Malley grunted, turning back to his sector. "Head in the game." Elara wiped her finger on her pants and gripped her rifle again. She looked at the blood on the wall. It wasn't Miller anymore. It was just information. It was just a resource. A part of her soul quietly shut a door and locked it, distancing herself from the humanity of the man lying next to her so she could function as the weapon she needed to be. "Movement! The wash!" Elara shouted, firing. The bullet struck the dirt just in front of a sprinting fighter. He stumbled, then scrambled behind a boulder. They were getting closer. 200 meters. "They're probing," O'Malley said, breathing hard. "They want to see if we have a machine gun. When they realize it's just rifles, they're going to rush us." "We need air support," Elara said. "Air is 10 mics out. We have to hold." Suddenly, a mechanical grinding sound echoed up from the valley floor. It was loud, metal on metal, screeching like a dying animal. "The BTR," Elara said, risking a glance over the edge. The armored vehicle was smoking, the engine dead, but the turret was moving. It was jerking spasmodically, turning slowly, inch by inch. "Manual crank," O'Malley realized, his voice dropping. "The hydraulics are out, so they're hand-cranking the turret. They're blind, but they know where the Rangers are." Down in the valley, the black barrel of the 30mm cannon leveled out. It wasn't aiming with precision. It was pointing generally at the irrigation ditch where the 30 Rangers were trapped. "They're going to spray and pray," O'Malley said. "If they start raking that ditch with HE rounds, the Rangers are hamburger." Elara looked at the approaching infantry on the ridge, then down at the BTR. "We have to stop the gun," she said. "We can't!" O'Malley fired a burst at the tree line. "We're suppressed. If you get back on the 50, these guys on the ridge will burn you down." "If we don't," Elara said, reaching for the M107 again, 30 mothers get a folded flag. She looked at the blood data on the wall. TR 350. The infantry was close, but the BTR was the immediate mass casualty event. "Cover me," Elara said. "Vance, don't cover me." She dragged the heavy sniper rifle back into position. She was fighting a war on 2 fronts now. Behind her, the infantry was closing for the kill. Below her, the Iron Beast was waking up for one last massacre. And in the middle, Elara Vance smeared the blood from her glove onto the stock of the rifle and settled in. "It's not dead! It's not dead!" O'Malley screamed, slamming his hand against the dirt. Down in the valley, the BTR-80 gave a convulsive shudder. The white smoke from the earlier hit turned into a thick, oily black plume. The diesel engine, a rugged beast designed to survive punishment, roared back to life with a metallic screech. The vehicle didn't retreat this time. The driver, realizing he was being hunted by a sniper, made a suicide run. He slammed the transmission into gear and surged forward, picking up speed, tearing through the mud walls of the village to close the distance on the Ranger ditch. "He's closing! 200 meters to the friendlies!" Elara yelled, forcing her eye back into the scope. The image jumped violently. The recoil from her previous shots had loosened the bipod tension. She slammed her shoulder forward, loading the legs, fighting the weapon into submission. "I can't get a bead!" Elara panicked. "He's behind the buildings! I can only see dust!" "He's using the alleyways," O'Malley barked. He looked up the ridge. The enemy infantry was closer now, 150 meters. Bullets were snapping over their heads with increasing accuracy. One round struck the radio antenna on O'Malley's back, shearing it off. Chief, the climbers! Elara shouted. Suppress them! O'Malley looked at the infantry closing in for the kill. Then he looked at the BTR charging the Rangers. He made the calculation. If he shot the infantry, the Rangers died. If he helped Elara, they might both die on this hill. He dropped his rifle. Screw the climbers, O'Malley said, grabbing his binoculars. I'm spotting. You kill that tank. Chief, focus, Vance. Ignore the gunfire. Listen to my voice. O'Malley crawled up next to her, exposing his head to the enemy fire from the ridge. He's moving east to west. Speed is increasing. 40 clicks. He's going to pass through a gap in the walls. Grid 45 Delta. Elara traversed the massive barrel. She found the gap, a narrow opening between a collapsed mosque and a stone barn. It was maybe 10 feet wide. At 40 kilometers per hour, the BTR would be visible in that gap for less than half a second. I see it, she whispered. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard the reticle was pulsing with her blood pressure. Thump, thump, thump. Range 900, O'Malley recited, his voice calm, an anchor in the storm. Wind has picked up. 7 miles, full value left. You need to hold 2 mils left. Lead him by 3 mils. 3 mils lead, Elara repeated. Her brain was doing the math, but her hands felt like blocks of wood. Bullets kicked up dirt into her face. The enemy infantry was suppressing them now. She flinched as a rock fragment cut her cheek. Don't you flinch! O'Malley roared, leaning over to shield her scope from the dust with his own body. Stay in the glass. He's coming up on the gap. 3, 2. Elara stopped breathing. She stopped thinking about the infantry. She stopped thinking about Miller bleeding out behind her. She stopped thinking about the Rangers. The world shrank down to a black crosshair and a patch of sunlit dirt between 2 mud walls. She didn't aim at the gap. She aimed at the wall before the gap. She had to fire before she saw the target. She had to trust the math. She had to trust the flight time. Time of flight, 1.4 seconds. Target speed, 11 meters per second. 1, O'Malley said. Elara felt the trigger break. It was a crisp, glass rod snap. Boom! The rifle kicked, punishing her bruised shoulder with renewed violence. The empty brass casing, the size of a flare, spun out and hit O'Malley's helmet. For 1.4 seconds, the bullet was alone in the air. A spinning cone of copper and steel screaming across the valley floor. In the scope, the gap was empty. Then, the nose of the BTR surged into view. The timing was perfect. The bullet and the vehicle arrived at the same point in space and time. The MiK-211 round didn't hit the engine deck this time. It slammed into the side of the hull, right where the fuel cells were mounted externally above the tracks. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. A fireball, bright orange and dirty black, erupted from the side of the vehicle. The BTR slewed violently to the right, its momentum carrying it forward as it burned. It crashed into the stone barn, the impact collapsing the roof onto the chassis. Splash! O'Malley screamed, his voice cracking. Target destroyed! Look at it burn! Elara didn't cheer. She cycled the bolt, clack, clack, chambering another round out of pure reflex. She watched the burning wreck through the scope. No one was getting out of that. Ranger 1 to Overwatch! The radio crackled, barely audible through the static of the damaged antenna. Target is burning! We are clear! Repeat, we are clear! You guys are gods! Elara let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for an hour. Her vision swam. The adrenaline dump was hitting her hard, making her limbs feel heavy and disconnected. We did it, she whispered. We ain't done. O'Malley grabbed her vest and yanked her down. Crack! A bullet slammed into the receiver of the M107 inches from her face. Sparks flew. The impact knocked the rifle out of her hands. "They're here!" O'Malley rolled onto his back, grabbing his M4. The infantry on the ridge wasn't suppressing anymore. They were maneuvering. They were less than 100 meters away, and they had just watched their heavy armor die. They were angry, and they had the high ground. "Get off the gun!" O'Malley yelled, firing blindly over the lip of the crater. "Defend the perimeter!" Elara grabbed her carbine. Her hands were shaking so bad she almost dropped it. She looked at the M107. The receiver was gouged where the bullet had hit. It was still functional, but she couldn't use it at this range. She was a rifleman now, and the enemy was close enough to see the whites of their eyes. "Grenade!" O'Malley screamed. A dark object sailed over the lip of the crater and landed with a heavy thud between Elara and the unconscious Miller. Time stopped again, but this time there was no math. There was only instinct. "Kick it!" Elara didn't think. She swung her boot, connecting with the serrated iron body of the F1 grenade just as it hit the dirt. It skittered over the lip of the crater, disappearing down the slope. Boom. The explosion was close enough to lift them off the ground. Shrapnel whined overhead like angry hornets, slicing through the air where they had been standing a second before. Dust rained down in a choking curtain. Elara curled into a ball over Miller, shielding his body with her own. She waited for the rush. She waited for the scream of the infantry charging through the smoke to finish them off. But the rush didn't come. Instead, a profound, heavy silence descended on the ridge. The frantic cracking of AK-47s stopped. The shouting ceased. "Why did they stop?" Elara whispered, her hand gripping her carbine, eyes darting around the rim of their crater. O'Malley was wiping blood from his ear, his face pale. They didn't stop because they gave up. They stopped to clear the lane. Snap. A single bullet cracked the air, passing perfectly through the gap in the rocks where Elara's head had been moments ago. It impacted the rear wall with a sharp pock, spraying rock dust onto Miller's face. "Sniper!" O'Malley hissed, pressing himself flat into the dirt. "Don't move. He's dialed in." Elara froze. That wasn't suppressive fire. That was a surgical strike. The enemy infantry had pulled back to give their own marksmen a clean line of fire. They had flushed the birds. Now the hunter was taking the shot. "Where is he?" Elara breathed, the sweat on her back turning cold. "Higher up," O'Malley whispered. "Probably the finger ridge to the east. He saw your muzzle flash from the BTR kill. He knows exactly where you are." Another shot. Snap. This one hit the M107, sparking off the barrel. The enemy wasn't just trying to kill them. He was trying to disable their heavy weapon. He was toying with them. "He's got the angle," O'Malley said, looking at the geometry of the rocks. "If we lift our heads, we're dead. If we stay here, he maneuvers for a kill shot." Elara looked at the M107. It was lying 2 feet away, heavy and useless if she couldn't see the target. She needed to spot him. But the moment she raised her optics, he would put a bullet through her lens and her eye. She looked at her medical bag. It was torn, dusty, and covered in Miller's blood. "I need to see him," she murmured. "You peek, you die," O'Malley warned. Elara unzipped a side pouch. Her fingers fumbled past the morphine and the bandages until she found what she was looking for. It wasn't a weapon. It was a dental mirror. A small, angled piece of glass on a long steel handle, used for checking airways in throat trauma. "What are you doing?" "Improvising," Elara whispered. She crawled to the very edge of the rock wall, keeping her body flat. Slowly, trembling with the effort of fine motor control, she extended the small mirror up past the cover. She angled it, catching the reflection of the eastern ridge. The image was tiny, distorted by the convex glass and the dust. She saw rocks. She saw scrub brush. She saw the sun glinting off the shale. Snap! The mirror shattered in her hand. The force of the bullet ripped the handle from her grip, leaving her fingers stinging. "He hit the mirror!" O'Malley gasped. "He's that good." "I saw him," Elara said, her voice shaking. "I saw the flash. Grid 51 echo. The cleft in the twin rocks. He's prone in the shadow." She knew where he was, but knowing wasn't killing. To take the shot, she would have to expose herself. She would have to be faster than a man who had already locked onto her position. "I can't beat him on the draw," Elara said. "He's waiting for me to pop up." "Then we flank," O'Malley said, reaching for his rifle. "No time. He's pinning us so the infantry can circle back. I have to take him now." She looked at the M107. The bipod was damaged. She couldn't mount it on the wall. She would have to shoot offhand or from an awkward, twisted position on her side. "Keyhole," Elara whispered. "What?" "There's a crack in the rocks, down low, near Miller's boot." She dragged the heavy rifle backward, sliding it through the dirt. She positioned the muzzle at the base of the rock wall, where a fissure no wider than a fist opened up a view of the eastern ridge. It was a keyhole shot, threading the bullet through a tiny gap in her own cover. She lay on her side, twisting her spine to align her eye with the scope. It was an excruciating position. The stock of the rifle wasn't seated in her shoulder pocket. It was resting against the joint of her shoulder and bicep, a recipe for disaster. "Vance, the recoil," O'Malley warned. "In that position, it's going to tear your arm off." "Hold my legs," Elara said, gritting her teeth. "Keep me stable." O'Malley didn't argue. He grabbed her boots, bracing her against the ground. Elara found the twin rocks in the scope. The shadow was deep, but now that she knew where to look, she saw him. The glint of a Dragunov barrel, the slight movement of cloth. He was waiting for her to stand up. He wasn't looking at the ground level. "Physics," she whispered to herself. Action and reaction. She ignored the pain in her twisted spine. She ignored the terrifying certainty that she was about to hurt herself. She focused on the shadow. She didn't wait for a breath cycle. She didn't wait for the wind. At this range, 400 meters, it was a point-blank shot for a 50 cal. She pulled the trigger. Boom. The rifle didn't kick. It exploded backward. Because she wasn't braced properly, the stock slammed past her muscle and hammered directly into the ball and socket joint of her shoulder. Elara screamed. A wet, popping sound echoed in her own ears, louder than the gunshot. Her vision went white with agony. The rifle flew out of her hands, clattering against the stone. "Target down!" O'Malley yelled, watching through his binos. "You turned him into pink mist! He's gone!" Elara didn't answer. She rolled onto her back, clutching her right arm. It hung at a wrong angle, limp and useless. The pain was a nausea-inducing wave that made the world spin. "Vance!" O'Malley crawled over to her. He looked at her shoulder. "Dislocated. Anterior. Maybe a fracture." "Is he dead?" Elara gasped, tears streaming down her dusty face. "He's dead. You got him." Elara squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the urge to vomit. She had won the duel. She had saved them again. But as she lay there, crippled and gasping, she realized the cost. She wasn't just breaking protocol anymore. She was breaking herself, piece by piece. "Fix it," she hissed through clenched teeth. What? Pop it back in. We aren't safe yet. O'Malley looked at her, then at her ruined shoulder. He nodded, his face grim. This is going to hurt more than the recoil. Just do it. Ready? O'Malley asked. He had his boot planted against Elara's ribs, his hands gripping her wrist and elbow. Just do it, Elara gasped, her face pressed into the dirt. 1, 2… Crack. He didn't wait for 3. He pulled and twisted simultaneously. A sickening pop reverberated through Elara's skeleton, followed by a blinding flash of white light behind her eyelids that was purely internal. She screamed, but the sound was choked off by the dust in her throat, turning into a dry retch. It's in, O'Malley said, letting go. It's in. Breathe. Elara lay trembling for a moment, the fire in her joint subsiding to a dull, throbbing roar. She tested the arm. It moved, but it felt weak, alien. The ligaments were stretched, the muscles in spasm. Sling it, O'Malley ordered, tossing her a triangular bandage from her own kit. You're useless with that arm. Keep it tight to your body. Elara fumbled with the knot, using her teeth to tighten the fabric. She was now fighting a war with one hand. Sit rep, she croaked, forcing herself to sit up. Ammo is black on the 50, O'Malley said, gesturing to the M107. We have maybe 3 rounds left. I'm red on 5.56, maybe 2 mags. You? 1 mag, plus the one in the gun. And we have 2 hours until dark. O'Malley looked at the sky. The sun was dipping below the peaks, casting long, jagged shadows across the valley. The temperature was plummeting. The heat waves were gone, replaced by a clarity that felt brittle. They're regrouping. They know we're hurt. They know we're low. A sound from the bottom of the crater cut through the tactical assessment. It was a high-pitched, sucking gasp, like a vacuum seal being broken. Elara spun around. Miller. The sniper was awake, but his eyes were terrified. He was clawing at his throat with his good hand. His chest was heaving, but he wasn't moving air. His face was swelling, the skin turning a deep, mottled purple. He's crashing, Elara said, sliding down to him. She placed her hand on his chest. The left side, the side with the wound, was rigid. It wasn't rising. What is it? O'Malley asked, scanning the perimeter. I see movement at the tree line. They're probing again. Tension pneumothorax, Elara said, her mind racing through the algorithm. The chest seal leaked or the lung blew. Air is trapped in his chest cavity. It's crushing his heart. He's suffocating from the inside. Fix him. I need to needle him. Elara ripped the Velcro on her medical pouch. She grabbed the ARS needle, a 14-gauge, 3.25-inch spear designed to punch through muscle and into the pleural space. Contact front! O'Malley opened fire. Bang! Bang! Controlled pairs. He was conserving every round. I need cover, Elara yelled. I can't cover the stairs and the slope, O'Malley shouted back. Watch the rear. Elara looked at the narrow rock stairs leading up to the rear of their position. It was a blind spot. If they came up that way while she was working on Miller, they would all take a bullet in the back of the head. She looked at Miller. His eyes were bulging. The veins in his neck were distended like ropes. He was dying. Right now. She looked at her rifle. She looked at her one good hand. God help me, she whispered. She jammed the stock of her M4 into her armpit, pinning it against her side with her injured arm. It hurt like hell, but it kept the barrel pointed at the stairs. She couldn't aim properly, but she could pull the trigger if a shadow appeared. With her right hand, her good hand, she uncapped the needle. Stay still, Miller, she hissed. She couldn't palpate the landmarks properly with one hand while balancing the rifle. She had to use her eyes. Mid-clavicular line, second intercostal space, or the new TCCC standard, fifth intercostal, anterior axillary. Miller was wearing body armor. She couldn't get to the armpit. She had to go high. She found the collarbone visually. She went down 2 ribs. "Incoming!" O'Malley yelled. Bullets chipped the rock above them. Elara didn't flinch. She drove the needle down. It required force. Human skin is tough. Intercostal muscle is tougher. She pushed the plastic catheter hub hard, feeling the pop as it breached the pleura. Hiss! The sound was audible even over the gunfire. A rush of pressurized air escaped from Miller's chest, smelling, metallic and foul. Miller's eyes rolled back, but his chest instantly deflated. He took a ragged, shuddering breath. The purple color began to drain from his face. "He's breathing!" Elara yelled, taping the catheter down with a bloody piece of adhesive she tore with her teeth. A shadow moved on the stairs. Elara didn't think. She twisted her torso, the rifle pinned under her bad arm swinging with her body. She saw a turban, a barrel. She squeezed the trigger with her good hand, firing from the hip. The gun awkward and unstable. Bang, bang. The rounds went wide, sparking off the rock wall, but the noise was enough. The shadow ducked back down. "Rear is compromised!" Elara screamed, dropping the needle casing and grabbing the pistol grip properly. "Grenade!" O'Malley yelled. But this time, he didn't throw it back. He fired at it in the air. Or maybe he missed. It landed short, rolling back down the slope toward the enemy. Boom! A scream echoed from the stairs. Elara's suppression had bought them a second. The grenade had bought them a minute. "They're testing the perimeter," O'Malley said, his chest heaving. He sounded exhausted. "They're trying to find the weak point." "They found it," Elara said, checking Miller's pulse. It was stronger now. The needle was holding. "We are the weak point." The sun finally vanished. The sky turned a bruised shade of violet. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 10 minutes. This was the thermal crossover, the time of day when the ground and the objects on it were the same temperature, washing out thermal optics. For the next hour, until the ground cooled, their high-tech advantage was gone. They were blind. They were out of ammo. They were broken. "Night is here," O'Malley whispered, changing his magazine. He held up the empty one. "Last mag, Vance. Make them count." Elara looked at Miller, alive but helpless. She looked at the blood drying on her hands. She looked at the darkness gathering in the valley, a darkness that was now moving uphill, silent and inevitable. "They aren't probing anymore," she said, sensing the shift in the air. The silence was heavier than before. "No," O'Malley racked his slide. "They're fixing bayonets." The darkness wasn't empty. It was alive. Elara couldn't see them, but she could hear them. The scuff of a boot on shale, the metallic click of a weapon sling swivel, the whisper of cloth against rock. They were close. Not hundreds of meters anymore. Not even 50. They were just outside the lip of the crater, coiling like a snake before the strike. "Slayer 6, this is Echo Actual," O'Malley whispered into the handset, his voice desperate. "We are black on ammo. We have hostile infantry maneuvering on our perimeter. Danger close. I need it now." The radio crackled, the signal weak as the battery indicator flashed a dying red. "Echo Actual, this is Slayer," the pilot's voice came back, calm and detached, floating somewhere in the stratosphere. "I'm on station, but I'm looking at a wash. Thermal is garbage. I can't distinguish friendlies from hostiles. You're all just gray blobs on my screen. We are the blob at the peak. The hostiles are the blobs moving up. Negative, Echo. The spread is too tight. If I drop, I wipe you both. Give me a mark. Sparkle it. My IR strobe is dead, O'Malley hissed, fumbling with the MS-2000 on his helmet. Vance, where's yours? Lost it in the blast, Elara said. She was huddled over Miller, her M4 in her good hand, aimed at the black void of the ridgeline. Slayer, we have no IR, O'Malley said. We are blind. Then I can't clear it hot, Echo. I can't take the shot. A rock clattered into the crater, landing near Elara's boot. It wasn't thrown. It was kicked by someone walking just above them. They're here, Elara whispered. Slayer, O'Malley screamed, abandoning whisper discipline. They are cresting the ridge. If you don't drop, we are dead in 10 seconds. Give me a mark, Echo. Give me anything hot. Elara looked at the M107. It lay in the dirt, the bolt closed. There was one round left. One Mk211 Raufoss, an armor-piercing incendiary. It burned at 3,000 degrees upon impact. Chief, Elara said, dropping her M4. The 50. It's empty. One round, in the chamber. She didn't wait for permission. She crawled to the rifle. Her right arm was useless, strapped to her chest, so she used her left hand to drag the heavy weapon around. It was clumsy, agonizing work. The barrel scraped across the stone. What are you doing? Giving him a mark, Elara grunted. She couldn't shoulder the rifle. She couldn't aim properly. She jammed the buttstock against a rock to absorb the recoil. She pointed the massive muzzle toward the cluster of boulders 10 meters to their left, the only cover the enemy could be using for their final assault. Slayer, Elara yelled toward the handset O'Malley was holding. Look for the flash, hitting the north rock face. Vance, that's suicide, O'Malley said. That's 10 meters away. Initials, Elara screamed. Give him your initials. In close air support, when friendly troops are within the risk estimate distance of the ordnance, the ground commander must give his initials to accept the risk of friendly fire. It is the military way of signing your own death warrant. O'Malley looked at the enemy shadows rising over the rocks. He looked at Elara. Romeo. Oscar, O'Malley said into the radio. You are cleared hot, Slayer. Danger close. Elara didn't use the scope. She just looked at the darkness where the enemy was. She grabbed the trigger with her left hand. Burn, she thought. She pulled. Boom. The rifle recoiled into the rock, jumping wildly. The bullet traversed the short distance in a fraction of a second. It slammed into the granite, boulder directly in the center of the enemy formation. The Raufoss round detonated. A brilliant, blinding sphere of white zirconium fire erupted, lighting up the night like a magnesium flare. For a split second, Elara saw them. 6 men, frozen in the strobe light of the explosion, their faces twisted in surprise, weapons raised. Contact the flash, the pilot shouted. Tally, rifles away. Elara buried her face in the dirt. O'Malley curled into a ball. 3 seconds later, the sky tore open. It wasn't a bomb. It was the gun. The GAU-8 Avenger from an A-10 Warthog. Bertie! The sound was a chainsaw the size of a building. 30mm depleted uranium shells rained down at a rate of 3,900 rounds per minute. The ground didn't just shake, it liquefied. The rock formation 10 meters away disintegrated. The air was sucked out of the crater, replaced by the smell of ozone, pulverized stone, and pink mist. The noise was so loud it bypassed the ears and vibrated the teeth, the bones, the soul. Then, silence. Absolute ringing silence. Elara lay there, covered in a fresh layer of dust. Her ears were screaming, She couldn't hear O'Malley. She couldn't hear Miller. She lifted her head. The rock formation to their left was gone. In its place was a smoking trench of churned earth. There were no bodies. There was just nothing. "Slayer to Echo," the radio crackled, sounding tinny and distant. "Good effect on target. That was a little tight, boys. I'm Winchester, returning to base." O'Malley sat up. He looked like a ghost, gray from head to toe. He looked at Elara. He looked at the smoking barrel of the M107. "You missed," O'Malley whispered, his voice shaking. "What?" Elara croaked. "You missed the enemy. You hit the rock behind them." "I wasn't aiming at them," Elara said, clutching her throbbing arm. "I was aiming at the rock. Splash is bigger than a bullet." O'Malley stared at her. Then he let out a laugh, a short, hysterical bark. He slumped back against the crater wall, sliding down until he was sitting next to Miller. "We're alive," he said. "We're actually alive." Elara didn't laugh. She looked at the devastation the plane had wrought. It was a god's hammer, summoned by a radio and a single bullet. She felt small. She felt hollow. She checked Miller. He was still breathing, the needle in his chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm. "Echo 1, O'Malley said, keying the mic, his voice regaining some of its steel. "Status is green. Threat neutralized. We are ready for extraction. Get us off this rock." The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the cold and the pain. Elara leaned her head back against the stone. Above her, the stars were coming out, indifferent to the butchery below. They had held the line, but the line had cut deep. "Dust off is 3 mics out! We need to move to the flat!" O'Malley shouted over the ringing in their ears. The ridge was a graveyard of silence. The smell of the A-10's run, ozone and pulverized rock, hung heavy in the cold night air. Elara tried to stand, but her legs felt like water. The adrenaline dump was hitting her now, a physiological crash that was almost harder to handle than the fear. Her knees buckled, and she had to catch herself with her good arm. "Vance, get up!" O'Malley grabbed her vest, hauling her to her feet. "We aren't camping here." He turned to Miller. The big sniper was dead weight, unconscious but breathing, the needle in his chest a fragile lifeline. "I can't carry him alone," O'Malley grunted. "Not on this scree. Grab his belt. We drag him." "My arm," Elara gasped, clutching her sling. "Use the left. Just keep him from sliding." They grabbed Miller by the drag handle of his plate carrier and his belt. It was a brutal, clumsy descent. Every step down the jagged slope sent a jolt of pain through Elara's injured shoulder, radiating up her neck and down her spine. Miller's boots scraped against the rocks, a sound that grated on her nerves. They made it 50 meters down to a small plateau, a flat shelf of rock jutting out over the abyss. It wasn't a perfect LZ, but it was the only place a pavehawk could hover. "Drop him here," O'Malley ordered. He fell to his knees, checking Miller's vitals immediately. "Pulse is steady, he's tough." Elara collapsed next to them, gasping for air that felt too thin to sustain life. She looked back up the slope. The OP was empty, but something was missing. The M107, she had left it in the dirt near the crater. "The rifle," she whispered. O'Malley looked at her, wiping grime from his face. "Forget it. We'll destroy it in place with a thermite grenade if we have to, or the birds will bomb it later." "No," Elara said. She stood up, swaying. "Vance, sit down. The bird is inbound." "I'm getting it. It's 30 pounds and you have 1 arm. Leave the damn gun." Elara didn't listen. She turned and scrambled back up the loose shale. It was irrational. It was stupid. It was dangerous. But that rifle had saved them. It had been the only thing between them and a shallow grave. Leaving it felt like leaving a part of herself, the part that had pulled the trigger, the part that had crossed the line. She reached the crater. The M107 was lying where she had dropped it, covered in dust, the barrel gray from the heat of the final shot. She grabbed the carry handle with her left hand. It was impossibly heavy. She dragged it. The buttstock bumped against the rocks. The bipod legs snagged on brush. She slipped, falling to her knees, crying out as her bad shoulder jarred against the ground. Get up. She stood. She dragged. She pulled the iron beast down the mountain, inch by inch. Below her, the sound of rotors began to thump against the valley walls. Bright lights appeared in the sky. The angelic halo of an H-60 Pave Hawk. "Vance! Move your ass!" O'Malley screamed, waving an IR strobe he had dug out of Miller's pouch. Elara slid the last 10 feet, the rifle clattering behind her. She collapsed next to O'Malley just as the helicopter flared. The rotor wash was a hurricane. It kicked up a storm of stinging gravel. Elara curled over the rifle, shielding her face. The noise was deafening, a physical pressure that squeezed the air out of her lungs. 2 PJs, pararescue jumpers, leaped from the side door before the wheels even touched the rock. They moved with terrifying efficiency. "Status!" the lead PJ yelled, kneeling by Miller. "Urgent surgical, tension pneumo, needle is in, chest wound," O'Malley screamed. "Load him! Go! Go!" The PJs grabbed Miller, lifting him like he weighed nothing. They threw him onto the floor of the chopper. O'Malley scrambled in after them. The PJ turned to Elara. He saw her sling. He saw the blood on her face. He reached out a hand to pull her in. Elara grabbed his hand with her left. But with her right pinned against her body, she clamped her elbow over the stock of the M107. "Leave the weapon!" the PJ yelled, trying to haul her up. "It comes with me!" Elara screamed back, her voice lost in the turbine whine. She refused to let go. The PJ saw the look in her eyes, wild, hollow, and absolutely unyielding. He didn't argue. He grabbed her vest and yanked her on board, the long barrel of the sniper rifle dragging across the metal deck plates. "Clear! Lift!" The helicopter lurched upward. The ground fell away. The dark ridge, the crater, the dead BTR in the valley. It all shrank into a map, then into nothingness. Elara sat on the floor, her back against the fuel tank. The vibrations of the aircraft hummed through her bones. A PJ was already working on her shoulder, cutting away her sleeve. "This is going to hurt," he said, prepping a morphine injector. Elara didn't feel it. She was looking at the rifle lying at her feet. It was scratched, battered, and empty, but it was there. O'Malley put a headset on her good ear. The sudden quiet of the noise-canceling comms was shocking. "Echo Actual, this is Ranger 1, a voice came over the net. It was the Ranger platoon leader from the valley. "We see your bird lifting off. We just want to say, thank you. That sniper of yours is a legend. He saved 30 lives today. Buy him a beer for us." O'Malley looked at Elara across the cabin. He held the gaze for a long moment. There was no mockery in his eyes anymore. No doc, no girl. He keyed the mic. "Copy, Ranger 1, O'Malley said, his voice raspy. "I'll let the sniper know." He didn't correct them. He didn't say she. He simply acknowledged the act. Elara closed her eyes. The morphine hit her system, a warm, fuzzy blanket that softened the edges of the pain. She rested her head back, her hand still gripping the cold steel of the M107. They were safe. But she knew, with a dark and heavy certainty, that she had left something up on that mountain that she would never get back. And she had brought something down that she would carry forever. The transition was violent in its sterility. One moment, Elara was vibrating with the mechanical hum of the helicopter. The next, she was on a litter, being rushed into the Roll 2 surgical tent at FOB Rusty Nail. The air changed instantly, from the freezing, dust-choked wind of the Zabad Valley to the recycled antiseptic chill of climate control. "Trauma team, we have two, one surgical, one ortho." Elara tried to sit up. "I'm fine, it's just a shoulder." "Lay back, sailor," a nurse commanded, pushing her down with a firm hand. "Let us do our job." They cut her uniform. The scissors sheared through the fabric she had worn for 18 hours, fabric stained with sweat, mud, gun oil, and Miller's dried blood. As the layers were peeled away, Elara felt a strange sense of exposure. On the mountain, she had been a weapon. Here, stripped to her undershirt and boots, she was just a patient. They relocated her shoulder with a sedative that made the world melt into soft edges. When she woke up, her arm was in a black immobilizer sling, strapped tight to her chest. She was sitting on a cot in the recovery bay, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. It was quiet, not the terrifying silence of the ambush, but the safe, boring silence of a rear echelon base. "Hey." Elara looked up. Chief O'Malley stood at the foot of her cot. He had scrubbed the camo paint from his face, leaving his skin looking raw and pale. He was wearing clean PT gear, but his eyes were still dark, still back on the ridge. "How's Miller?" Elara asked, her voice raspy. "Stable. Surgeon said the needle saved him. Lung reinflated. He's going to Landstuhl in the morning, then back to the States. He keeps asking for his rifle." Elara looked down at her lap. "It's in the armory. I made sure the master-at-arms took it." O'Malley stepped closer, pulling a plastic chair up to the bed. He sat down, the plastic creaking under his weight. He held a green, hard-bound notebook in his hand. "We just finished the debrief with the commander," O'Malley said quietly. "Rangers are singing your praises. They want to put you in for a commendation medal with a V device." "I was just doing my job, Chief." "No," O'Malley shook his head. "Your job is to patch holes. Making holes is my job. You did both." He opened the green notebook. It was the sniper log, the official record of every shot taken by the team's designated marksman. It tracked rounds fired, atmospheric conditions, and confirmed kills. It was a legal document. O'Malley placed the book on her lap. "Miller is out of the fight," O'Malley said. "Technically, I could sign this off as the platoon leader. I could say Miller took the shots before he passed out. Or that I did. He tapped the page with a pen. But that would be a lie, and we don't lie in the log." Elara looked at the page. The date and time were filled in. Under the column for shooter, it was blank. Under target, it listed 1X technical, ZPU 2, 1X BTR 80, mobility, catastrophic kill, 1X enemy sniper. "Sign it," O'Malley said. "I'm not a sniper, Chief. I'm not even a SEAL. If I sign this and HQ sees it, if HQ sees it, they see the truth," O'Malley interrupted. "You took the weight. You take the credit. Or the blame, whichever way you see it." Elara picked up the pen with her left hand. Her handwriting was shaky, barely legible. She looked at the empty box. She didn't feel like a hero. She remembered the recoil. She remembered the pink mist of the sniper. She remembered the smell of the burning BTR. It wasn't glory. It was a burden. A heavy, black weight that she would carry alongside her medical bag. She signed, PO2E Vance. She closed the book and handed it back. "Good," O'Malley said, standing up. He slipped the book into his pocket. "Get some sleep, Vance. You look like hell." "Chief?" O'Malley paused at the tent flap. Did we win? O'Malley looked at the sterile white walls, then back at her. 30 Rangers are going home to their families instead of in boxes. Yeah, Doc. We won. He walked out. Elara lay back against the stiff hospital pillow. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Behind her eyelids, she didn't see darkness. She saw the reticle. She saw the numbers. Wind 5 left. Range 900. A nurse walked by, pushing a cart of medication. Can I get you anything, hon? Water? No, Elara whispered. I'm good. From the bed next to her, separated by a thin curtain, a groan broke the silence. A deep, familiar, gravelly groan. My gun, the voice rasped. Elara froze. Miller was awake. The curtain rail screeched as Elara pulled the divider back. Miller looked smaller in the hospital bed. Without his plate carrier, his ammunition, and his bravado, he was just a man with a tube coming out of his chest and a pale, unshaven face. The morphine pump hummed rhythmically beside him, but his eyes were open, staring at the ceiling tiles with a glazed intensity. Elara sat on the edge of her own cot, her immobilized arm throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She waited. She knew the protocol. You don't speak to the operator until he acknowledges you. Miller turned his head slowly. The movement clearly cost him pain. He winced, his breath hitching as the chest tube shifted between his ribs. His eyes found Elara. They were bloodshot, groggy, but the sharpness was returning. You're still here, Miller rasped. His voice sounded like grinding stones. My ride doesn't leave until 800, Elara said softly. Shoulder needs a checkup before I fly. Miller blinked, processing. He looked at her sling, then he looked at her hands. They were scrubbed clean, but the cuticles were still stained dark with carbon and CLP, cleaner, lubricant, preservative, the indelible mark of the weapon. O'Malley was here, Miller said. He told me. Elara stiffened. She braced herself for the anger, for the accusation that she had touched his kit, that she had violated the sacred bond between a sniper and his rifle. He told you what? That the BTR is dead. That the sniper on the ridge is dead. Miller paused, swallowing hard against the dryness in his throat. He said you signed the log. I did. With my gun. It was the only gun that could make the shot, Miller. Miller stared at her for a long, uncomfortable minute. The silence stretched, filled only by the beeping of the cardiac monitor. Elara felt the urge to apologize, to explain, to justify the desperation of the moment. But she held her tongue. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had done what was necessary. What was the hold? Miller asked suddenly. Excuse me? The BTR, Miller clarified, his voice gaining a fraction more strength. Moving target, 40 clicks, 900 meters. What was your hold? It was a test, the final exam. He didn't care about the result. He cared about the math. Elara didn't hesitate. The numbers were burned into her brain. Target was moving left to right. Wind was 7 miles, full value left. I held 2 mils left for wind, led him by 3 mils for speed. I aimed for the wall before the gap. Miller's eyes narrowed slightly. He ran the calculation in his head. 3 mils lead, with a MK211 round. Yes. Miller let out a breath, his chest rising and falling painfully. He looked back at the ceiling. That's a good hold. It was the highest praise he was capable of giving. The rifle? Miller asked. Armory, it's safe. Master at Arms has it locked up. Is it clean? Elara almost smiled. I didn't have time to clean it, Miller. I was busy dragging your heavy ass down a mountain. Miller let out a short, wheezing chuckle that turned into a cough. He winced, clutching his side. When the spasm passed, he looked at her again. The mockery was gone. The Doc nickname, spoken with a sneer in the briefing room, was absent. "Good looking out, Vance," he whispered. "Just doing my job, Miller." "No." Miller closed his eyes, the morphine pulling him back under. "Your job is the needle, the rifle. That was extra credit. Thanks for taking care of it." He didn't thank her for the tourniquet. He didn't thank her for the needle decompression that kept his heart beating. He thanked her for the gun. To a civilian, it would have seemed insane. To Elara, it was the only acceptance that mattered. He drifted off to sleep. Elara stood up. The air in the tent felt stifling. She needed to breathe. She walked out of the medical bay, pushing through the heavy plastic flaps into the cool night air of the FOB. The base was quiet. A generator hummed in, the distance. The sky was awash with stars, the same stars that looked down on the Zabad Valley. She walked to the wash station, a row of metal sinks under a singular, buzzing yellow bulb. She turned on the tap. The water was cold. She pumped the dispenser, coating her hands in gritty, industrial orange soap. She began to scrub. She scrubbed the dirt from under her nails. She scrubbed the dried blood from her wrist. She scrubbed the smell of the hospital from her skin. But as she rinsed the suds away, she saw the dark stains still lingering in the creases of her fingers. The gun oil. It had soaked deep into the pores, resistant to the soap. She stared at her hands. These were the hands that had stitched flesh. These were the hands that had ended 3 lives. She dried them on a paper towel. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of blue latex gloves. Her next shift started in an hour. There were wounded coming in from another sector. She pulled the glove onto her left hand. Snap. She pulled the glove onto her right hand. Snap. The gun oil was covered. The warrior was hidden beneath the healer again. Elara Vance looked at her reflection in the metal mirror above the sink. Her eyes were older, darker. "She's the medic," she whispered to herself, repeating the words the SEALs had scoffed at 2 days ago. She turned off the light and walked back into the dark, ready to save the next life, knowing full well she was capable of taking one.